Hey crew, it's Coach Josh with GarageGangGyms.com, and today we're doing a deep dive on the back squat. Back squat is probably my favorite exercise to do because it not only promotes leg strength, but it also promotes core strength and your mind strength, right? It's really tough to do really hard squats. Now, talking about that, it's very important that when we squat, we are uncomfortable. Okay. The whole point is to load this bar onto our bodies so that we have this deep, hard compression throughout our entire body. All of our bones, all of our core muscles, everything. So, as we discuss this back squat today, it's all about just that. How do we get that bar to compress our body more so that we can have more pressure? Because the more pressure we can endure in our core, the more reps we can do and the more weight we can do safely. So it all comes down to, is that bar on my bones? What am I doing breathing wise? What are my hips doing and how am I controlling them so they stay under the bar? What are my feet doing and what's my balance like and my position and angles like so that I can get that bar to travel in as straight of a line as I possibly can on the way down so I keep my balance. But most importantly, so that when I go into the bottom and up from the hole, I can come out of that position in balance so that bar can come up fast and straight. Now that's a lot that I just said. So let's chunk this apart. So what I'm going to be doing is walking through my entire back squat workout for you. You may not see every set that I do, but as I'm going, I will talk to you guys. And right now, I'm pretty cold. I actually just finished a little bit of weightlifting, but I'm jumping into back squats now because that's how I like to finish some of my workouts. So let's talk about the bar, the rack position, and what I'm doing even with the empty bar and my warm-ups. So our goal is to put as much weight onto our bones as we possibly can. And by bones, I mean bones. So we're talking high bar squat here today, not low bar squat. Low bar squat is pretty similar. We just put the bar anywhere from 1 to 3 inches lower. But this bar is going to sit on my bones, and more specifically, the bones of my shoulder blades, right? And just at the top. Now, a lot of people have a tendency when they rack this bar, they're going to put it more on their meat, on their traps like this. And that's perfectly fine. You certainly can do it that way. But when it's a little bit higher on your neck like that, and more specifically, it's right on, and you can feel it on your own neck. There's a vertebrae that sticks out. It's right on that vertebrae. Now, I certainly have a scar because I used to squat that way, but I found that it's actually a lot harder to hold that weight on your back. And here's why. Imagine we have a triangle. Now, on the tip of that triangle, if we're balancing this bar, that means that the 100 pounds, 200 pounds, whatever you're squatting, all of that pressure is down right on the tip of that triangle. So what I'm asking you to do is, rather than putting it on your neck, is to slide it down just a little bit more onto the bones of your shoulder blades, your scapula, so that instead of a nice tip, it flattens out that tip a little bit more. It's going to load our bones more because it's actually sitting more on our bones. And then when we're bracing, which we'll talk about later, we're not trying to push up on this bar. We're going to be locking that bar in nice and tight so that when it's in your bones, it stays there better. And again, more surface area, it means that more of your body is holding that weight rather than just one single vertebrae. Again, it feels awkward at first, but it's all about adding more pressure so that we can lift more. So let's show you that. Okay, so width-wise, some people are going to grab nice and wide. You're going to fall anywhere from the collars all the way to your hands almost touching, okay? And really, it matters, but it doesn't matter. What matters is you get it on your bones and you're able to feel tension in your upper back. Sliding your hands in a little bit might give you more tension. Sliding your hands away a little bit might give you less. It's going to come down to your mobility and your comfort, okay? Again, if your shoulders are just terrible mobility-wise, you may have to slide your hands out as far as we can. So it's going to go on my bones, like so. So again, this is where a lot of people want to put it. I'm going to put it just a little bit lower. And again, you can see how if I shrug up, that's where my scapula is, right the spine of my scapula. So it's going to go right there. Then the tendency is for your wrists to be cocked back, and then I lose all of my back tension. So actually what I want to do is make sure that I'm almost trying to point my knuckles forward a little bit so that my elbows can be somewhat down, but more importantly, my wrists can be nice and straight. And you can see how my upper back is nice and tight instead of being loose like this with my wrists bent. So again, my wrists are straight. Now, a cue that a lot of people hear is trying to kick your elbows up. And you can see what happens when I kick my elbows up. Yes, I can gain some tension throughout my upper back, but I actually lose quite a bit, more so around the middle part of my back, which is a terrible thing if we're trying to brace, right? But it's also going to kick me forward. And again, it rides that bar up higher, more away from our center of gravity, okay? So the elbows up thing isn't what we're looking for. We want to get that wrist relatively straight. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the more you bend, the worse, and the higher your elbow, the worse. And that's actually a really easy fault to see in people as they're coming up out of their squat. If the first thing that happens is their elbows kick up as they're coming up, it means they didn't have back tension. So if you're filming yourself doing squats, really check that. If your elbows are kicking up, you probably don't have enough back tension. Okay, then what I'm also doing with my hands is you can have your thumb on the other side of the bar. You can have it on the same side as your fingers. I personally like to wrap my hand around, but because my wrist is straight, or sometimes I might even put a little bit of flexion on it, I'm trying to get that bar deep into my hand like it's a shoulder press or a bench press. And by doing that, I'm able to take my palms and pull down a little bit. So I'm not trying to squeeze the bar and pull it down that way. I'm trying to keep my wrists straight. And instead of thinking even with your palms, maybe you're trying to pull your elbows down. Because again, we're trying to lock this weight into our core as much as we can. So I'm putting it on my bones, wrists are straight, pulling down, and then I can stand up. And if you notice, I'm squatting under, I would take a good breath, I'd be braced, and then I'd push up. Then I would step back, find my balance, and squat. Okay, so you see that from a different angle. I'm going to step under, put the bar on my bones, wrists are straight so that I can pull my elbows down. I take my breath, and then I'm going to step back 1, 2, and find my stance. So again, in this video, I'm assuming you know how to just squat in general, and we can advance this with the bar. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to keep my body still, and then I'm going to rock on my feet. What this is going to do is it's going to help me find the middles of my feet. Back here, my toes actually come up. Here, my heels come up. I'm trying to find the point where my feet, my toes actually try to clutch the ground. That is going to give me a nice active foot. It's going to set me up so that I am nice and tight. Then from here, we're just thinking about our rack position and our feet right now, and then we'll dive deeper from here. So I'll take my breath, I'll squat, I'll come up, I'll squat, I'll come up. Normally I wouldn't be talking, but again, we're just talking through this. So for my general warm-up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bar, maybe 6, 8 repetitions, 2, maybe 3 sets. I'm just trying to get generally warm. The first set is always terrible. The second set feels a little bit better. By the third set, I'm getting bored. So that's when I decide to add weight. You might only need 2 sets. You might need 6 sets. Now, a lot of people will say you need to squat the bar just like you would the empty bar, like you'd squat 400 pounds. There is a little bit to that, but let's be honest. If 400 pounds is on your back, that weight is trying to make you do things that the empty bar just couldn't do. And 400 pounds might be overpowering you much more than the bar itself. So yes, there is something like that. But again, we're trying to load our bones, find our balance, and make that bar travel in as straight of a line as we can. Sometimes a little bit of weight actually allows you to manipulate yourself and the bar a little bit more. But that's not an excuse to squat the bar terribly, okay? So now, as I'm doing my squats, let's talk about some of the things that I'm thinking about. So again, I'll break the main cardinal rule of core pressure here for a while I'm talking to you. Okay, so focal point. I'm staring straight ahead. So as I squat, let's just look at my focal point. I'm just staring straight ahead, right in the center of this G, right in front of me. There's a reason the banner is right here. Okay, then let's creep down a little bit into my hips. Some people have a tendency to really lead with their hips. Some people have a tendency to try to tuck their hips at the start. What I want you to think about is neutral. It's really hard to explain beyond the word neutral, but that's essentially what we're trying to do. So again, if I tilt my hips back, what that's going to do is as I'm squatting, it's going to jam my hips forward into my legs here, and I'm actually going to get some cramping sensation here, and it's really hard to keep my core tight because by tilting that far, I'm actually stretching my core underneath and putting a ton of pressure in my lower back. However, if we go the other way, it's the exact opposite. I'm putting too much pressure in the front, not enough pressure in the back. So what I like to say to people is once you've found your balance, you can even play with your hips a little bit. What we want is a little bit of glute tension, but instead of having our hips tilt or tuck, right? We want our hips to just slightly move forward. So again, I didn't tilt them under, I didn't tilt them back. But what you can do when you have a lot of weight on your back is you can't see yourself, so you have to be able to feel it. Is can I squeeze my glutes a little bit so that my hips move forward? And the reason I specify it that way is when I squeeze my glutes a little bit so that my hips move forward, it actually gives me better posture. And it's harder at the top to feel how your posture actually feels like you're more stacked and more stable. It's more so at the bottom. So let's take it to the bottom and we'll talk about how having this exact same pressure in your glutes will actually give you a more upright position. Our goal is for that bar to line up right over the centers of our feet. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that our hips come under us by us squeezing our glutes and that we've done that foot control. So I have my foot control, hip control. I'm going to go to the bottom so that you can see this. Now at the bottom, this is me sticking my butt back. You can see how I actually folded, and it's really hard for me to get a good mid-back pressure. If I bring my hips under too far, I have the same issue. But if I bring my hips forward using my glutes so that I have better posture, you can see how I'm way more stacked here at the bottom. And I'll take a good breath so you can really see it. Right? This is a good stacked position. If I stick my butt out, it actually kicks me back into my heels. Still warming up for you. Let me rattle off maybe 6 reps for you so you can see this. So again, I find my feet somewhere in here, my hips so that I have better posture. I'm going to take my breath and I'm going to do 6 reps. That might have only been 5. So you probably heard my knee popping. Now, for me, knee popping doesn't hurt. If it doesn't hurt you, it's nothing to be too concerned about. But consistent knee popping. For me, that means my feet aren't in the right spot yet. I'm cold, and that's why I'm warming up, right? First set always feels terrible. But as you go, there should be less and less popping. Because for me, the popping is if my foot collapses a little bit, maybe my shin isn't turning correctly, my hip doesn't open up enough, then there's space for the joint to move. And if that joint moves in a direction it's not really supposed to, especially if we're squatting to compress, that's releasing that gas, causing that pop. And on a consistent basis, that means you're doing just something a little bit wrong every time that you could improve on. Now, maybe you're born with, different hip structures, knee structures, foot structures, whatever. Maybe you have an ankle injury, whatever. It's really important that you try to figure out and limit as much of that popping as you possibly can. Again, if it doesn't hurt, don't be too concerned. But just because it doesn't hurt now doesn't mean it's not going to hurt in the future. Okay, so let's do another set. Now, hopefully you noticed how straight of a line I was trying to go, even though I'm dealing with what's going on with the popping. But something I did terribly, and I'll talk about now, is at the top of my set, what I want you to do is when you get to the top, I want those legs nice and tight and those hips in the position we want. Now, by doing this, this is actually going to make your legs more tired. And again, I have a tendency not to do this always because I'm lazy, first of all. But second of all, if I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have 5 sets of 6 to do today, I don't want to come to a stiff lockout every time, but I still may do it on my first repetition, my last repetition, whatever. So again, at the top, let's make sure my legs are nice and locked. And then we'll add some weight. So I find my balance. I get my hips into a position so that I have the best posture. I'm pulling my elbows down. I'm going to take a breath. Good. Now, Josh, your knee stopped popping. Yes, it did. And the reason is as I was standing up and locking my legs out, I sensed, oh, I'm getting a little bit too much hip action going. And instead of tucking my hips, just like we're talking about, I need to make sure my glutes are pushing my hips forward, not me tilting. And as soon as I fixed that, my posture was better. There was less looseness in my body, and I could feel my quads a lot more. That's why using the empty bar can be great, and all of these warm-up sets is as you're building into your weight for the day, you're making these, oh, it feels like that. You're making these adjustments, right? So let's slap on some more weight and let's talk about as it gets heavier. Okay, so let's talk about your butt for a second. When does your butt work? Because people squat in order for their butt to get bigger, stronger, juicier, whatever it is. Your butt works in two ways. The first way, because there's multiple muscles to your glutes, the first way is helping to hold your upper body at a certain angle, right? Because your butt's in here while your legs move, okay? That's part of what your butt's job is to help give you good posture from the tailbone up. Second thing it does is out of the bottom, my first instinct is to actually squeeze my glutes just a little bit, okay? Because what's happening is when I hit the bottom, my butt is stretching its most, or my quads, but my butt is stretching the most it's going to. So it naturally wants to contract a little bit. And again, right out of the bottom, this is where people have a lot of problems in and out of the bottom is they'll lose their posture just a little bit. And oftentimes it's not core pressure or balance, it's actually their butt turned off and they didn't turn it back on. So at the bottom, if your first instinct is glutes then legs, so it's like this, that fast, okay? So it's because you can't think of two things at once, but glutes and legs, then your glutes will make sure, hey, we're still in a good posture so that my quads can do their job and I'm not going to strain one of my psoas muscles or both in order to come up, right? So speaking of, what do you do on the way down and on the way up? What I'm thinking through as I go down is, again, I'm trying to balance, do all this compression and yada, yada. But what I'm doing is I'm drawing my knees up, right? So I'm not just sitting down. That's where a lot of people go wrong. I'm actually trying to bring the floor to me. I'm lifting my knees toward me so that I hold my good position. Then with that pressure, my butt will fire and then I'll push down, right? Butt fires, push down. And if my butt doesn't fire first, watch what happens. If I just drive my leg, my hips are actually going to tuck or they're going to slide or I'm going to lose pressure of some sort. So if I go glute leg, then it keeps my hips where I want them and it allows the leg without moving first to push straight down, okay? That's really, really crucial. And a way you can work on it is actually doing really high step-ups. If you have a really high box and you drive down in, you will feel how your glute has to fire in order to get your leg working, right? So that my body can stay in this good posture. It's not straight down because this is no glute. My glute helps bring my feet under me. So let's watch that. Just watch my butt. So again, even though my torso angle looks exactly the same, my body's going through a lot of movement actually, but in a nice slow control. So I'm here as I come up, because my butt fires and my torso can stay in the same position, I'm able to have my legs actually kind of morph as I move. So it's again, not straight down. Technically it's this way, even though my feet aren't sliding, right? It's not down, it's down and back because my hip kind of pushes my weight forward. Now, speaking of weight forward, my torso angle is slightly forward so that when I squat down, all that pressure is right here on my quads. If I'm pushing back through my heels, that pressure actually creeps towards my knees a little bit, but a lot of more stretch goes into my glutes and hamstrings. This is more of a low bar position. If I go too far forward, now it shoots all the way down my quad, but I have no stability from the rest of my leg. So as I go, again, I want this nice angle to help compress. But if you'll notice, my torso angle and my shin angle, if you can see that, my torso angle and my shin angle are staying relatively similar, right? My torso leans a certain amount, my shin angle leans a certain amount, because as I come up, my shin angle and my torso angle stick together. If my torso angle changes, my shin angle has to compensate. I want, as I come up, to keep my legs in one place so that my torso and shin angle can stay similar. And then at some point, knees have to travel back, and then my chest actually rises just a little bit to compensate so that my knees can shift back and I can stay balanced. Okay? So, how do we work on that? We need ankle flexion, right? We need to be able to bend in our ankles. So, you can put a plate underneath your heels to help that. You can use weightlifting shoes like I have. This is a little bit of a built-in heel. And in my squat warm-up video, I actually show you a few exercises directly related to the ankle. So go check that out if you need a little bit of clearance. So let's add some weight. Let's change the angle a little bit so that you can see the relationship between my torso and my shins as I'm doing these squats. Okay, so you can't quite see all of me right now because of the angle change. But again, we're going to try to get our torso to line up with those shins for as long as we can. So again, we got to keep our knees in the same position as we go into and out of the bottom of our squat so that I can keep using my legs and not let that pressure shift. Okay, so you probably heard it on that last set, but let's talk about breathing. What I'm doing with my breath is, again, I'm trying to trap as much pressure into my core as I possibly can. And the way we do that is, again, the bar loading our bones, it's compressing our core down. Us pulling our knees up, using the floor, that's going to give us compression from below. And then because I'm bracing my core and I take that rapid breath, it's actually pulling everything in from all the way around. I actually feel this in my obliques. And we'll talk more about this when I actually put my belt on later. But I am taking my breath. I'm going to let it settle for a second, half a second. And in letting it settle, all of the pressure gets trapped. Some people have a tendency to go like this and then go right away. They go and they're moving. Your body never had a chance to actually clench down. And then before it clenches down, you're already moving. So chances are that air pressure is just going into your lungs. And we need it everywhere. Every inch of your body, we want to put as much air into it as we can. From your pubic bone all the way to your neck, as much air as we can get in there as fast as we can. So we're going to take a breath, we're going to brace, and then we stay balanced. Those are the 3 B's, right? Breathe, brace, balance. Okay, so let's do that. Hold your breath through the hardest part of the exercise. And for me, that's pretty much the whole thing. So some other things we haven't talked about yet is tempo. What I'm doing is trying to keep the same tempo. I'm going down a second or two, rebounding out of the bottom, and then I'm trying to stand up or drive down, however you want to think of it, as fast as I possibly can while maintaining balance. It doesn't help if you punch out of the bottom fast and don't concern yourself at all with how you're coming up. And that's where that balance really comes into play. Is you've probably heard me say this 1,000 times. We need to push through your whole foot, but it's almost impossible to push through your whole foot if you're rushing out of the bottom and you just start pushing through your big toes and your heels basically come up, or you've been told 1,000 times to push through your heels and your hips move and you're not able to stand all the way up because your balance changes. Again, we go down so that we can hit a consistent bottom position. Some people fall out of the sky and stand up. Some people go down at like a 4 count. But what always matters is you stay balanced the whole time. Because the way down is like you lining up your shot, okay? The way down, if we take too long, will actually make you tired to stand up, and that's true. But you're lining up your shot. If you can get that perfect on target, you can hit a new PR. If you're a little this way or a little that way, who knows? Maybe you have to compensate. So how much is it okay for us to deviate our form? So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do a few sets of squats for you in the hopes that I can pinpoint a few problems or faults that I have as well, so that you can see some of the errors I may make, and then I can actually do a form check on myself. So I'm actually going to throw my belt on and let's do some more squats. Okay, putting the belt on. Everything's the same. Taking my breath, bracing, doing everything the same. And I'm going to breathe and brace the exact same way as me putting my belt on. I'm leaving a little bit of looseness so that when I brace and latch it down, I can still breathe. So let's get there first. Okay, still a little bit of looseness. I'm going to breathe, I'm going to brace, put as much tension through my body as I can. The belt's going to help me do that a little bit. Here we go. Well, first set's always the worst. So even at a more moderate weight, this is not a maximal weight for me. The first time you do it, it always feels terrible. It should feel the worst it's going to feel the whole workout. And the exception to that is if you're doing 6 sets, 8 sets, as that fatigue settles in, your last few sets might suck just because you're tired. But here's what I experienced. Here's what I'll talk you through. So, first rep, as always, I said to myself, oh, this is heavy. Always, doesn't matter what the weight is. So it always creeps into my head because it's the working weight for the day. It should feel uncomfortable. So first rep, took my breath, did everything, stood up. But you probably noticed I made an adjustment. Great. I didn't like where my stance was. In fact, on all of my sets of more than one, if I hit something and if I feel a little this way, that way, I'll make adjustments. Now, that makes you hyper aware of where your feet are, but it's also really good because if that first one's a little off, you can still power through. Now, on a 1 rep max, you're not really going to be able to move your feet, and that's where programming really comes into play. As you program, you don't do 1 week I did sets of 8, and then the next week I did a 1 rep max. There's so much of a difference in weight that you need to practice more than just the weight. You need to practice balance, timing, breath, motivation, right? So for now, for a set of 6, no big deal, okay? And as I was going, I was making little tweaks and this and that because I like volume for my technique work. It was my first set. It's going to feel awful. This next set normally feels even better. Now, because I'm talking to you, I am a little bit distracted. So normally what I would do is music is playing and I'm thinking, okay, if I first one felt my foot was a little forward and I moved it out, let's just put my feet there to begin with. As I was going, I felt a little more left than right leg. So I actually felt myself shifting side to side to try to make sure I was in the middle. So that means that I need to be more active with both of my feet so that rather than pushing onto one or pushing onto the other and I shift, I can, instead of shifting, I can lock myself in better. So there's just things that I will take into this next set based on the last set. And that's exactly how you should look at your squats. You don't max out all the time. All of the other workouts are you prepping to max out if you max out. So again, I have a few more sets of 6 for you, and I'll try to walk you through some of the things that I'm thinking about as I go. And always walk it straight into the rack, hit those uprights, then drop it down. If you are in the habit trying to set one down, you're going to miss at some point, and boy, is it uncomfortable when you miss. If you have a bad habit like I tend to do and not use clips, those weights are flying, okay? I actually had it once where I was training somebody in a rack and the people 2 racks over didn't use clips, did that, missed, all the weights fell off, then that bar came flying. Thankfully, they were in a power rack, so there's 4 posts, and they're adjoined by 2 cross members here. So the bar ended up hitting there, but thankfully there was nobody next to us. There was a squat rack in between us, but boy, that thing came flying at us. That could have done some damage, right? So what did I think about? The whole time, all I was thinking about is active feet and use your glutes to have better posture. Now, a huge, huge thing that I want everybody to learn is patience. So you can tell by my breathing, after my 5th rep, my heart rate was elevated, my breathing rate was elevated, but I I patiently took my time because I felt I needed an extra breath. I didn't rush. So many people, let's say they're doing 10 repetitions, they rush through those first 6 and their form is all over the place. And then they have 4 left and they're panicking because their heart rate's up, their body feels like crap, and they just try to hammer out the rest of that set. The problem with that is now 3 of your reps look like this, 2 of your reps look like that, some of them look like that, some with core pressure. They're so inconsistent, your body can't get good at any one of those because you haven't assigned what a squat is. Your body's just doing this thing, okay? It's just sitting down and standing up, yes, but if you practice a certain way and try to hit that every single time, now you're working on ingraining just one squat so that when it is a really heavy weight, you don't have to think, how do I squat? No, you can just squat, okay? Patience. Again, after the 5th rep, I stood up and I'm like, wait, take a second. I'm not in a hurry. I'm not trying to show off. I need to make sure things are happening the way I need them to, okay? So my 3rd rep got a little wild. What happened was I lost my left glute a little bit. As I was sitting down, I lost the engagement. So rather than letting my torso drop, I ended up letting my hips come back a little bit. And what actually happened was I had a rapid stretch in my hamstring because of that. All of a sudden, my hamstring was in a shortened position. I let my hip go and it got into a stretched position. And just that it distracted me a little. It didn't hurt, but it's not something I want to get in the habit of doing. It was 3rd rep of me basically saying, my hubris, oh, this is going really well. So it checked my ego a little bit. Hey, still a working weight. It's not impossible, but make sure you're still doing it well. Otherwise, it's going to be uncomfortable. Then repetitions 4, 5, and 6. I hesitated a little bit more in between sets and just made sure before I did my descent, I felt the part of my glute that I needed to be turned on, which is right in here. I felt it so that as I squatted, this is what I was thinking about. Just keeping engagement here. It actually put my knees slightly more forward, put me in a lot better position at the bottom so that I could stand up. So again, that's the beautiful thing about doing multiple sets where you're actually thinking about your technique. It's heavy. My legs are burning some, my butt's burning some. It's not impossible because I can still think. So many people put so much weight on the bar that they lose their ability to think. Now that's really important for you to do after anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks of lighter volume training. So I'm starting a 6-week block of doing volume training. And in that volume training, this is day 1 for me. So it's lighter, it's still challenging, but it allows me to really set the stage for good form. Then next week, based on the notes I write myself, and you should be writing notes to yourself as well, I can remember back to today's session and say, oh, that's right. I had that glute issue. Let's see if it's still there. If it is, let's work on it. If not, let's work on something else. And then week after week, as I'm building up repetitions or weight or sets or whatever I end up doing, I'm actually just building up sets with this program. I can try to capitalize on those new technique gains. Then when I switch into doing instead of 6s and 8s, which I'll probably get to at the end of the 6 weeks, but if I'm switching into 3s and 5s, then I can be okay with losing a little bit of my focus because of the weight, right? The heavier it is, the harder it is to feel your body and to think, and you get more into that fight or flight response, okay? So again, it's really important that we do some or a lot of sub-maximal training so that we can actually focus on our technique and then ramp up this beautiful technique as we get further. That will increase your longevity in the sport and decrease your injury risk, right? Because if you're always putting so much weight on, you can't even think, you don't even know when your heels are lifting up, when you're twisting to one side, when you're not taking in enough air because maybe you're just loaded by so much and it's your 5th set and you're so tired and you can't even take a good breath, okay? So again, submaximal training for a while, and then once you feel your technique is awesome, you can build back up. But once you get to that 1 rep max and you fry your nervous system, maybe take a week off, guess what? It's almost like starting all over again week 1. Sometimes you forget how to squat and you have to reteach yourself. Last set, best set. So not once did I have that issue. The whole time I was just thinking about locking in that glute and making sure it was doing its job. No cracks, no pops, no issue. So that's a note I'm going to write to myself. Because again, when you're doing really hard training, you let your form slip a little bit. You know, the last thing I'm thinking about when I do a 1 rep max attempt is how good is my form? No. What I'm thinking about is keep your shit together, take a breath, hit the bottom and stand up. Because when that weight's on your back, you're already scared, you're intimidated, you're anxious. Your fight or flight response is on an all-time high. For me, I tend to lose my hearing a little bit. I can't really hear anything. I get pressure in my ears because my adrenaline's just pumping. Last thing I can do is calmly think about, hey, where's my glute at? No. So again, as you get closer and closer to that actual 1 rep max attempt, a PR or whatever, you're going to let things slide. You're going to let things slip. You're going to be tired. You're going to be really beat up. If you just got through a week of, 6 sets of 5 or 4 sets of 4, you're pretty tired, right? pretty heavy weight, quite a few repetitions, plus you were probably doing other exercises that week too, and not just squats, you're pretty beat up. So the next week, when you do a few less reps, a few less sets, you might let a few things slip because you're just a little tired. Then you carry that into your doubles maybe. Then maybe you feel better after taking a lighter week, or maybe you're the type that goes right from doubles right into your 1 rep max attempt and you don't take that taper week in between. Again, as we get really, really heavy, we let some things slide. And it's really important that we come back and try to let less slide this next time, right? So my first 1 rep max attempt was pretty much this weight, 292. And it was ugly. Now, today, it's my week 1 weight, and I'm never letting what the crappy things happened at 292, whatever they were, happen on this. I want them to be clean and precise. And that's also why the program I'm doing right now is less about adding weight each week and adding more repetitions, right? So I can build up that base so that when I do go into my next 1 rep max attempt, the last thing I have to worry about is, do I know how to squat? All right, guys, deep dive into the back squat. We talked about load your bones. Find that core pressure, as much pressure as you can. Line those hips up so that you can keep a consistent angle and have better posture into the bottom. Where your knees go, what your feet are doing, how to push through the bottom. Talking about tempo, bracing, everything that you need to know so that you can improve your back squat. Now, with any of these cues, do not do or try to do all of them. Video yourself. Figure out, number 1, what does my rack position look like? If that sucks, start there. Number 2, what are my feet doing? If they suck, that's the next step. Step 3, what's my breathing and bracing doing? Step 4, what's my angle? Then from there, start layering on some of the other things we talked about. You will not be able to implement all of these things all at once. Start with one thing and do it like you saw me doing with the glute. Do it for 3 to 6 weeks, really focusing on mastering that new rack position, mastering that new foot position, that pressure, that angle, whatever it is. If you guys like videos like this where I'd take a deep dive in the middle of a workout of mine and try to teach you like I would teach one of my other clients, please drop a like, hit subscribe. Likes get me so fired up to keep wanting to put out this content for you. Every like is like an ember in my fire, and it makes me want to put out better content for you guys. This is Coach Josh with GarageGangGyms.com. I hope these tips help. I'll see you next time.